Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. My name is Harish Kumar. In today's tutorial, we are diving into a new module I have developed for Laravel Sanctum Authentication in Nuxt 3. This module is called Nuxt Sanctum Authentication. Simplifies integrating Laravel Sanctum into your Nuxt 3 project, making authentication smooth and secure. Let's dive in. Let's start by getting to know what the Nuxt Sanctum Authentication module is all about. This module is designed to make it easier to set up and manage authentication in your Nuxt 3 app using Laravel Sanctum on the backend. It takes care of things like logging in, logging out, checking if user is authenticated, giving you access to a pre-configured API client, authentication composables, middlewares, and much more. Whether you are building a single page application or using server-side rendering, this module has you covered. The best part, you won't need to write all the authentication logic from scratch. The module does the heavy lifting for you. Now let's dive into the code and see how to use this module. First, we will create a fresh Nuxt 3 app and at the same time set up a new Laravel application to serve as our backend. So let's open the terminal. To create Nuxt app, let's run the command npx nuxt at latest init and then our Nuxt 3 project name. Let's say Nuxt 3 app and press enter. Here I'll select npm. Here let's also initialize the git, so press enter. Next, navigate to this Nuxt 3 app, so cd Nuxt 3 app. Now let's add the files to git and commit changes, so git add, git commit, and the commit is initial. Now let's open the project in the VS Code editor. To verify everything is working, let's open the terminal and here I will run npm run dev. This will start the development server and we can open this URL to check if app is up and running. So in the new tab, let's open this URL. Great, our Nuxt 3 app is loaded and working perfectly. Next we need to create login and register pages and display them in the top navigation bar. First we will install Tailwind CSS for styling. So let's head over to the official Tailwind CSS documentation for Nuxt.js. We need to follow these steps to install Tailwind CSS in our Nuxt app. Let's install this Tailwind CSS and its dependencies. So let's copy this command and in the project, let's stop this. And here we will install Tailwind CSS and its dependencies. It is done. Next, we will run this command to generate Tailwind configuration file. So let's copy this and in the terminal, let's run npx tailwind css init. It's done. Next, we need to add this Tailwind CSS auto prefix in the Nuxt config.js. So let's copy this and open the editor. Here, let's navigate to the Nuxt config.ts and paste that right here. Our next step is to pass these template paths in the Tailwind configuration. So let's copy this and in the editor, let's navigate to the Tailwind config.js and paste that right here. It is done. Let's see our next step. Next, we need to create this asset css main.css file and in this CSS file, we need to add these Tailwind directives. So let's copy this path and in the editor, here let's create file asset css main.css and here we will paste these Tailwind directives. Copy this and paste it here. And our final step is to add newly created main.css file in the Nuxt config.js. So let's copy this and in the editor, in the Nuxt config.ts, paste that right here. It's done. Now let's test the setup. So in the app.view, Here I will replace this code with the h1 tag. Let's say this h1 tag has hello world, and let's add a Tailwind classes to this div. So class bg gray 700, and also let's add Tailwind class to this h1 tag. The spec coder AI has auto generated this Tailwind classes for us. Let's accept this, save, and now in the terminal let's run the npm run dev. Let's check the browser. Now we should see a gray background and white text. Great. Tailwind is successfully configured. Next we will create the login register pages. So first let's close all these open files. Here we need to create a pages directory where Nuxt will automatically generate routes for each page. Let's start by creating index.view for the home page. In this file, I'll create a full screen div and align an h1 tag in center using Tailwind CSS. So here I'll type instruction for spec coder AI, create a full screen div and align the h1 tag in the middle of the div using Tailwind CSS. Here the spec coder has generated a snippet code for us. Let's accept this, and also let's remove this instruction. Spec coder has also detected that it is view file and added this template tag. Now let's check this in the browser. We won't see the home page, and in the editor, if we see the terminal, here it shows that your project has pages but the Nuxt page component has not been used. So to fix this, let's open the app.view, and here let's remove this code and add Nuxt page component, which is the main entry point for the page content. Save this and let's go back to browser, and this time it shows the hello world from the pages index.view. Go back to editor. In the index.view, let's change this hello world with home page. Let's see this in the browser, and here we have home page. Next, let's create other pages. So I'm going to duplicate this index.view, and let's say its name is dashboard.view, and here instead of home page it should be dashboard. Next, let's duplicate this and let's rename to login.view and change this text to login. Next, let's create register.view and here change this to register. Let's move this login.view and register.view into the separate directory auth. So here I'll create new folder auth, and in this auth folder I'm going to move login and register. Now let's close all of these. Next, I will also create a layouts starting with the top navigation bar. So first, in the app.view, let's wrap this Nuxt page with another component Nuxt layout. Next, let's create a layouts directory, and in this layouts directory I'll create a layout default.view. In this default layout I will create a top navigation bar. So here I'll ask spec coder AI create a top navigation bar using Tailwind CSS and include links for home, login, register, dashboard, logout, and display the user name, and use the Nuxt link tag to create the links. Spec coder has generated the HTML markup for top navigation bar. Let's accept this, and also let's remove this instruction. Save. Now let's check this in the browser, and it did not work. We get the error cannot read property of undefined reading logged in. Let's see this in the code. The error is right here. The spec coder AI has automatically added this vif directory. Right now we do not have this feature, so let's remove this, and also let's remove this, and here let's add name, let's say Harish Kumar. It is done. Now let's go back to the browser, refresh. Now the navigation bar looks great. Let's try to visit pages and we get the not found error because here our login path is auth/login and here auth/register. Now let's see this in the browser. Go to home page, refresh. Now let's try to visit login pages. It has navigated to the login page, but we cannot see the login text here from the login.view. So back to the editor in the layout. Here we need to add a slot. So here add a div tag. Here I'll add class hScreen. Next, right here I will add slot. It is done. Now back to the browser. Here we get the login text. Similarly, let's go to the register. Here we have register, dashboard. Now the pages are working perfectly. Next, let's create a login form for this login page. So in the editor, let's close all of these and open the file pages auth login.view. Let's remove all this HTML code and here I'll ask SpecCoder AI to create HTML markup of login page using Tailwind CSS. Let's accept this. Now let's remove this instruction line. Again, SpecCoder has added these view directives. Right now I do not want this. I will add these later. So let's remove them. And this vModal binding also. It is done. Now let's check this in the browser. We have a nicely styled login form. Similarly, let's create a register page. So let's copy all of this HTML markup code. Next in the register.view, let's remove this and paste all the login form markup. Now let's make changes. First thing in the h1 tag, here let's say register. Next we need to add input field for name and password confirmation. So let's duplicate this email input field and now let's set this email to name and the type is text. And in this email div, let's add margin top 3. Next, let's duplicate this password field and here it is going to be password confirmation. Fix this name, password space confirmation. Next, in this button, let's replace this login text with register. Now that the register page is ready, let's see it in the browser. Let's go to the register page. It is looking good. Our Nuxt 3 app is now ready. Let's commit all these changes. First, let's close all of these and in the Git version control tab, first add this Nuxt config, package.json, Tailwind configuration, main.css. In these files, we have Tailwind configuration. First, let's commit this only. I'm going to use SpecCoder AI to generate automatic commit message. So let's click this generate commit message icon. There is lot of changes, that is because of this package lock JSON. Unstage this. Now generate commit message. It has generated the automatic commit message. Feed add Tailwind CSS, add package log file, commit. Next, add all these files and generate automatic commit message and click this commit button. Great. Next, let's set up our Laravel application. So in the terminal, here we are inside the Nuxt 3 app. So cd ... to go back one directory and here I'll create a fresh Laravel application by running the command Laravel new. Let's say our Laravel application name is Laravel API. It is done. Now let's go inside the Laravel project. So cd Laravel API. Next, let's initialize the git. So git init and git add git commit and the commit message is initial commit. Now let's open this Laravel app in the editor. Our next step is to install the Laravel Sanctum package. Let's refer to the Laravel Sanctum documentation. New tab, open the Laravel Sanctum documentation. The Sanctum provides two methods of authentication: API token authentication and SPA Authentication. While both options are available, SPA Authentication is generally recommended when you are working with front-end like Nuxt and an API backend. It offers great security benefits like CSRF protection, session handling, without the hassle of managing multiple tokens. The Nuxt Sanctum Authentication module supports both methods of authentication. So in this video, I will be showing you both methods, API Token Authentication and SPA Authentication. We will start with SPA Authentication. For SPA Authentication to work, both your Nuxt app and Laravel API must share the same top-level domain, although they can reside on different subdomains. Before setting up Laravel Sanctum, let's ensure that we have the same top-level domains for Nuxt app and the Laravel API, as it is common mistake when working with Sanctum SPA Authentication. So let's make sure we do it right. In the editor Nuxt3 app, let's open the nuxtconfig.ts. Here we will configure the custom domain using the dev server option. Here the host is going to be our Laravel apps domain. So for example, let's say here if our host is myapp.test, then the Laravel app should be either myapp.test or something like api.myapp.test as a subdomain. Next, after making this change, let's stop the npm run dev and run this again, npm run dev. Now the Nuxt app should be running on myapp.test. Let's copy this and open this in the browser. The app should be loaded in few seconds. It is loaded and the app is working fine. Next we will link our domain to Laravel app. Next in the Laravel project, let's open the terminal and here I will run valet link and our Laravel API domain is, let's say, api.myapp.test. Actually we do not need to add this test. Valet will automatically configure this for us. So press enter. I am working on Ubuntu and using Valet Linux Plus on my system. If you are also working on Linux system and interested to setting up Valet Linux Plus, I have already created a dedicated video on this topic. You can find the link in the video description. Now let's open this URL in the browser. So in the new tab, api.myapp.test. Great. Both the Nuxt app and the Laravel app are now running on matching domains, which is crucial for Sanctum SPA Authentication to work. With the domain setup, next step is to install Laravel Sanctum. So in the editor, Laravel project, in the terminal, let's clear this and here I will run the command php artisan install API. This command will automatically install the Laravel Sanctum app and it will do the required configuration for Laravel. So press enter. It has published the one migration for API token. Although we do not need API token for SPA authentication, we will run this migration anyway. Once that's done, let's review the changes. In the composer.json file, you will see that the Laravel Sanctum package has been added, and in the bootstrap app.php, it has added the API route. Additionally, it has published the migration file that creates personal access token. This is the API route file and this is the Sanctum configuration. Let's close all of these and let's commit all these changes. So let's add to stage and generate commit message. Commit message generated, add Laravel Sanctum for API authentication. Great, commit this. Now let's go to the Sanctum documentation in the SPA authentication section. Here the first step is to configure the first party domains. We need to configure the stateful domain in the Sanctum configuration file. So to do this, let's navigate to the editor and open the file config sanctum.php, and here we need to find stateful domains right here, this one. we can set the stateful domain using this environment variable. So let's copy this and open the .env file. We can place this anywhere in this file, let's say at the bottom right here, and it is equal to, here we need to specify the domain myapp.test along with the port that Nuxt app is running on. Be sure to include this port for stateful domain. Now save this. Next step involves adding Sanctum middleware. We need to take this stateful API middleware and add this to the bootstrap app.php. So let's navigate to the editor, and here let's open the file inside bootstrap app.php, and here we can add the stateful API middleware within this with middleware right here like this. It is done. The next step is related to cross-origin resource sharing and cookies. This is incredibly important. The majority of errors you might encounter when trying to authenticate with API comes from course errors. So let's go ahead and publish this course configuration. So let's copy this, and in the terminal let's run the command php artisan config publish course. Let's close this terminal and looks for this course configuration file, this one, and see what we need to do. The first important thing is this paths. Anytime we request an API, we need to add the path here. We will come back to this later and paths as needed. And the next part is this supports credentials. We need to set this true. It is done. Let's look for the documentation for any other steps we need to take. The next configuration suggested using Axios. We are not going to use Axios in our next app, so we can skip that. Another important step is configuring the domain for session. So head over to this config session.php in the editor, config session.php. Here we will search for domain. This one. We can set this using session domain environment variable in the .env file. So let's copy this, and in the .env file, let's search for session domain. In our case, our Nuxt app is running on myapp.test and the Laravel app is running on the subdomain api.myapp.test. In that case, here we need to set .myapp.test. With that, we have completed the backend configuration. Now let's commit all these changes, add files to stage and generate auto commit message and commit the changes. We can now test sending request from our Nuxt app to Laravel API to verify everything works as expected. Alright, let's get back to our Nuxt app. Now here we will install the Nuxt Sanctum Authentication module, configure it and test it to ensure the backend API works as expected. So let's head over to the Nuxt Sanctum Authentication documentation. Here is the link for the documentation. Let's open this and let's go to the installation section. We will use this provided command to install this module. So let's copy this, and in the Nuxt app, let's open the terminal, and in the terminal we are getting error, no match found for location path logout. Let's fix this first. So in the layouts, default layout, here in the navigation we have this logout link, and this logout navigation do not exist. For now let's add this to home page. Close this. Now next in the terminal, let's stop this npm dev. Next here I'll run this command to install this Nuxt Sanctum Authentication module. Let's run this. Once it is done, you will notice that in the Nuxt config.ts, here it has automatically included this Nuxt Sanctum Authentication module. If in your case it is not added right here, add it manually. Now that the module is installed, let's navigate to the required configuration right here. Here we need to set this API URL for our Laravel application. So let's copy this and paste that in the Nuxt config.ts right here. Don't worry about this error. It will be fixed when we will run the npm run dev. Here we need to replace this with our own Laravel API URL. In our case, that is running on api.laravel my app.test. Now let's head over to the documentation, and as you go through the documentation, here in the configuration section, here you will see more configuration options, and we can set all these configuration like this shown right here. The another important configuration is this auth mode. If you are using cookie based SPA authentication, set this to cookie. If you want to use token based authentication, set it to token. By default, it is set to cookie. Let's copy this option as well and add this in the next configuration right here. We will explore other configuration options later, but for now, let's test our setup by making a request to Laravel API. Here you can see it provides various composables. We will start using with this useSanctum. This useSanctum composable provides properties like options. This option is the Nuxt Sanctum Authentication configuration options, and it provides the user that returns the authenticated user and is logged in property to determine if the user is logged in or not. And next, it provides the method login, logout, and refresh. Let's start with this login method. So in the editor, first let's run the npm run dev. npm run dev. And now you can see the error from here is vanished. Now to test this login method, let's navigate to the pages auth login.view. First here let's add the script tag. Next in the script tag I will call the useSanctum composable. From it we will extract the login method. Next we will create a submit form function. So const submit form, and it is going to be a arrow function, and in this arrow function I'm going to call this login method, and this login method required credentials. So here I'll create a form variable. So const form is equal to, and the spec coder has automatically completed it for us. It is equal to ref, and that has the object with email and password property. And next we're going to pass this form value in this login method. So form.value. Next we need to connect this to our form in the template. So right here in the form we will call add submit.prevent is equal to submit form. Everything is set. Now let's test this in the browser. So let's navigate to the login page and open the browser inspect tool. In the network tab, let's only filter the fetch and XHR. Here we want to make sure that we don't get any codes error when sending requests to API. So when we click on this login button and check the network tab for a request to the login API, and you can see here we get the codes error. To fix this, head over to Laravel project, open the course.php configuration file, and here in the paths, here we need to add the login path in this paths array along with this API and Sanctum CSRF cookie like this /login. After saving the changes, go back to the browser, clear the network tab and click the login button again. Now this time here you can see a 404 error. That is actually good. It means the course configuration is working. Now let's go back to the Laravel app and create a login route. So in the routes web.php, here we will create a post route for login, and it has a closure function. This closure function takes request, $request, and then we will return request all. Is done. Let's test it in the browser, clear the network tab and click the login button. This time request to login API has 200 status, and in the response we should have email and password. Great. Don't worry about this user API request error. After successful request to login API, module automatically make request to the user API to fetch authenticated user. So don't worry about this user API error. So everything is working correctly. Now let's go back to the Laravel app and remove this temporary login route and close this and close all of these. Next we are going to install Laravel Fortify, which provides predefined login, registration, two-factor authentication and other features we will need. You can use your own implementations if you prefer, but Fortify already comes with everything we need for authentication, so we won't have to do much. If you want to dive deeper into the Laravel Fortify, I have already made a detailed tutorial series on it. You can find the playlist in the video description. Now let's head over to the Laravel Fortify documentation. Let's go to the installation section. To install Fortify, we need to run this composer require Laravel Fortify. Let's copy this and in the editor, let's open the terminal and here let's run composer require Laravel Fortify. Once it is done, we need to publish the Fortify resources. So for that, we need to run this php artisan fortify install artisan command. Let's copy this, run this command in the terminal. Fortify scaffolding installed successfully. Next, let's run the migration php artisan migrate. Although we won't be using two-factor authentication in this tutorial, the necessary columns will be still added. Now let's run php artisan route list. Here you can see Fortify has registered routes for login, logout, register, reset password and more. Remember, in the config course.php, we have already added this login route in the paths. So for the moment, we do not need any further course configuration for basic authentication. Now let's create a user in the database and try authenticating through our Nuxt app. To do this, let's open the terminal and here we will open the tinker by running the command php artisan tinker. Then we will use user factory to create a new user in the database. So here I'll say user factory create and in this create method pass an array. In this array we will have name. Let's say name is Harish Kumar and next we need email. Let's say harish@example.com and then password is bcrypt password. Press enter. Now that we have created a user in the database. Now let's test the authentication. First, let's review the login form in our Nuxt app. We have this form variable that contains email and password. We also pull in this login method from this useSanctum composable. In the submit method, we call the login method and pass the form value. And when the form is submitted, it triggers submit form function. Next, we also need to bind form values to this input field. So here I'll say v-model is equal to form.email and for this password input field, let's bind v-model is equal to form.password. Save all these changes. Now let's test this in the browser. Here in the Nuxt app, let's close this, enter email that is harish@example.com, password and click login button. Great, we are successfully logged in and redirected to the home page. Now to verify if we are logged in, let's head back to the Nuxt 3 app and open the layouts default.view. Here let's add a script tag. Inside this script tag, we will call the useSanctum composable. From this composable, we will extract the property is logged in, which will tell us if the user is logged in or not. In the template section, we will conditionally display the register and login links if user is not logged in. If user is logged in, we will show the dashboard and logout links. So here I will create a template tag and wrap the login and register link in the template tag and add the condition v if not is logged in. If user is not logged in, then display this login register links. Also, let's wrap this in the template tag and display this if is logged in. So when the user is not logged in, display login register links, and when user is logged in, display dashboard, logout and this username. Now let's also display the logged in username. So from this useSanctum composable, we will retrieve user object. If you want, you can define the user object's properties with TypeScript. For example, let's say here we have interface user, and in this user we have name string and email string, and then we can pass this user interface right here like this. Now let's scroll down. Here we will add condition v if we have user, then display user dot name. That's it. Now let's see it in the browser. Refresh the page and you will see the dashboard and logout links along with the logged in username Harish Kumar. Great. Now let's implement the logout feature as well. So in the Nuxt app, in this composable, let's grab the logout method. Next we will create a function logout user. Inside this function we will call this logout. Next let's scroll down. Right here we have this logout link. Let's comment this. Instead of this, here I'll add button and it will have logout, and this button has this class margin right 4, and on click this button, click dot prevent, we will call the function logout user. It is done. And also let's remove this commented code. It is done. Let's see how this works in the browser. Refresh the page and click this logout button. It did not work. Let's open the inspect tool. In the console for this logout API, we get the codes error. Let's see one more time. So clear this, and in the network tab, click logout button, and here you can see for the logout API request, we get codes error. To fix this, let's head back to the Laravel app, and in the codes configuration, in the path, let's add the path for logout. Now go back to the browser, refresh, click this logout button. This time it worked and we are successfully logged out. Let's test the flow one more time. Let's go to the login page and enter email harish@example.com, password, and click this login button. We are successfully logged in, and click this logout button and we are logged out. Next, let's talk about middlewares. Right now we are logged out, but if we try to visit dashboard, we still can access it. This shouldn't happen, as it should be protected so that only logged in user can access it. To restrict access to pages, we can use the middleware provided by the Nuxt Sanctum Authentication module. Let's check the documentation for this. Here it provides the middleware called Auth. Let's copy this code, and in the editor, let's open the pages dashboard.view, and here let's create a script tag, and here paste the code to apply middleware. It's done. Back to the browser. Now if we try to visit dashboard, we should be redirected to the login path. But wait, we are getting page not found error. That is because our actual login path is auth/login. So we need to override the default login path in the configuration. So back to the documentation. Under the configuration section, scroll down. Here we have some redirect options. Let's copy this, and in the editor, in the nuxtconfig.ts, paste that right here. The first option is enable intended redirect. We will explore this option later. The next option is this login path, where we need to specify our app's login path. In our case, that is auth/login. Before we see other option, let's test this first. So in the browser, let's go to the home page, and when we are not logged in, let's try to visit dashboard, and immediately it redirected to auth login. Great. Now let's check the next option, guest only redirect. This option controls where users are redirected if they are logged in but try to access a guest only pages like the login page. Let's see this action. So in the browser, let's log in into the app, enter the email harish@example.com, password, and click login button. Now we are logged in. If we try to visit auth login page, it still opens the page. Ideally, it should not allow logged in user to access the login page. To handle this, Nuxt Sanctum Authentication module provides a guest middleware. Let's find this in the documentation. Here in the middleware section, we have this guest middleware. Let's copy this. Now in the editor, in the login.view, in the script section right here, paste the code to apply guest middleware. Now back to browser. Let's go to the dashboard. Now if a logged in user try to visit a login page, they will now be redirected to the home page. But what if we want logged in user to be redirected to the dashboard instead of home page when they try to visit the login page? We can configure this. So in the editor, go back to the nuxtconfig.ts, set the guest only redirect path to dashboard. Now let's test this. Once it is loaded, let's go to the home page, and from here let's try to visit the login page. So auth login, and immediately it is redirected to the dashboard. Now let's move on to the next option. The redirect to after login option is pretty self-explanatory. It allows you to specify the path to redirect user after a successful login. Similarly, redirect to after logout option specifies where to redirect user after they log out. Now let's implement the registration feature also. So first in the Laravel app, open the terminal, let's exit this tinker, and here let's run php artisan route list. Here you can see Laravel Fortify already provides a register route. To avoid any course issues, we need to add this register path in the course configuration right here. Laravel Fortify also provides routes for other features like reset password, two-factor authentication, and more. If you want to implement all these features in your Nuxt app, you will need to add their respective routes in the course config. But if you do not want to deal with each route individually, there's an alternative. So let's open the config Fortify configuration file, and in this configuration file, let's look for the option prefix. This one. It is currently set to empty string. Let's change it to API. Now go back to terminal and run the php artisan route list again. You will see that all the Fortify routes now have API prefix. In the course config, right here in this paths array, we already have this API path, so we don't need to manually add any Fortify route paths. This login and logout feature is provided by the Fortify, so we can remove it from here. At this point, login and logout features in Nuxt app won't work because the paths have changed. Let's test this. Let's open the inspect tool, and in the network tab, on click this logout button, we should see error in the network tab right here. This is happening because the previous path no longer exists in Laravel API. To fix this, we need to update the paths in the Nuxt module configuration. Let's head to the documentation. In the configuration section, let's go scroll down, and here we have sanctumEndpoints object, where we can override the paths for the Laravel endpoints. So let's copy this, and in the Nuxt app, config nuxt.ts. Let's paste that right here. We do not need to touch this CSRF user API. Their endpoints are the same. The only paths we need to update are for login and logout. Change the login path to API/login and here also API/logout. Now that is updated. Let's test this in the Nuxt app. Now click on this logout button. This time it should work and we are successfully logged out. Let's try to log in back and enter harishchatexample.com password and click login button. We are successfully logged in. Great. Next, let's implement the registration feature. So in the editor, first let's close all of these and open the pages auth register.view. Here first let's create the script tag and then let's add the guest middleware. I will copy it from the login view, paste it right here. Next, let's create a variable form. Const form is equal to ref. Here the spec coder has generated a snippet code for us. Let's accept this. Now bind these form values to respective input fields. Here is the name input field. p-model is equal to form.name. In this email input field, v-model is equal to form.email. v-model is equal to form.password. And finally, in this password confirmation input field, v-model is equal to form.password confirmation. It is done. Now let's create a function register user. Now inside this function we will make a post request to API register path. For that we will use useSanctum fetch composable provided by the Nuxt Sanctum Authentication module. Let's check this in the documentation. Here is the useSanctum fetch. This useSanctum fetch provides a pre-configured OFetch client that is customized for Laravel Sanctum. It handles CSRF tokens, manage cookies, can also be integrated with async data. Here is the example code how to use it with async data. It automatically uses the base URL set in the Nuxt configuration. In our case, that is in the Nuxt config.ts, this API URL api.myapp.test. Now let's use the useSanctum fetch for user registration. Let's call this useSanctum fetch and also use await keyword, and for that we need to make this function a sync function. Now in this useSanctum fetch, the first argument is going to be the path. In our case that is API/register, and the second argument is going to be the object, and it is going to have method post, and then the body is going to be form.value. After successful registration, we will need to refresh the user data. So let's grab the refresh user function from the useSanctum composable. Here let's call the useSanctum composable, and then we have const. Let's grab the refresh user function, and after successful registration call the refresh user function. Let's call it await user refresh. Once this is done, we will redirect the user to the dashboard. So here we will return navigate to dashboard. Now let's test this registration process. So in the browser, log out the user and let's navigate to registration page and enter the name. So let's say name is John at example.com, password, confirm password, and click this register button. Page refreshed and nothing happened. I forgot to call this user register function on submit this form. So here I will say add submit.prevent call register user. Now go back to browser, refresh, enter name John, email John at example.com, password, confirm password, and click this register button. Great, we are successfully registered and redirected to the dashboard. And this is the logged in username John. Next, let's handle the validation errors in the registration form. So in the editor register.view, let's start by creating a new variable const errors, and it is going to be ref. By default it is empty object. I prefer using TypeScript for better type safety. So here I will create TypeScript interface validation error, and in this validation interface here I have a key. This key is going to be string and it is equal to string. Next we can apply this validation error interface to our error variable like this. Next, in this register user function, let's add the try catch block. And move this code in this try block. Here in this catch it is going to have error. Next here we will use if condition. If error is instance of fetch error, and make sure to import this one right here, and error dot response dot status is 422, which indicates validation error. And then here I'll set errors dot value is equal to error dot response dot underscore data dot errors. Here the name of this error and this errors is confusing, so let's change this to E. Here also let's change this E. Now it is looking good. Next, let's display the error messages under the corresponding input fields in the template. So for this name input field, let's say here we have span tag, and this span tag has class text red 600, and here I will add condition v if it has errors.name, then display errors.name at 0 index. Now let's copy this and paste this under this input field. Here the name is going to be email. Similarly for this password input field, here the name is going to be password, and for this password confirmation, here the name is going to be password confirmation. That is done. Our error handling is set up. Now let's test this. So in the browser, refresh, log out the user. Let's go to the register page and click this register button without filling any field. As expected, we should see validation errors displayed. Let's go ahead and register a user to make sure everything works. So here let's say name is Jane at example.com, password, confirm password, and click register button. And there we go. A new user has been successfully registered and redirected to the dashboard. Now that we have seen how SPA cookie authentication works, you might prefer to use API token authentication instead. Let's see this as well. So in the documentation, in the API token authentication section, first in the Nuxt configuration, we need to set this auth mode to token. But before that, we need to prepare our Laravel app to generate authentication tokens. In the Laravel app, we need to create a route to generate token for authenticated user, and it should return the token in a specific format like this. And we also need a route to destroy the token when user log out. Let's check for the Laravel documentation to see if any additional configuration is needed for API token authentication. So let's scroll up. Let's go to the API token authentication section. The first step is to use has API token trait in the user model. So let's go to the Laravel app and let's first close all of these and let's open the app model user model, and here I will use has API token and make sure to import this right here. Next in the documentation, next we need to create a route to generate the token. So for that we will create a token authentication controller. So let's open the terminal and here I'll run php artisan make controller token authentication controller. The controller is created successfully. Now in the routes api.php, here let's create a route for tokens create, and it is going to use the controller token authentication controller, and it will call the store method. Next here I'll assign guest middleware. Let's create another post route tokens delete. It is also going to be use token authentication controller, and it will use the method destroy. Next here I'll assign the middleware Auth Sanctum. It is done. Let's go to this controller. I have already prepared a snippet for this token authentication controller. So let's open the Control Alt Cheat panel, and here in this drop down I will search for Laravel snippets, this one, my Laravel snippets, and here we have snippet for Sanctum token authentication controller. Let's copy all of this code and navigate to the token authentication controller and remove all this code and paste our new snippet. Now let's walk through this controller. The first, in the store method, we validated the request to ensure it includes a valid email and password, and then we retrieved the user associated with this email, and then we validated the password using #check. If the password doesn't match, we throw the validation exception with this message. If the password is correct, we created the token for the user and returned in the response. Next, in the destroyed method, we can revoke the tokens in two ways. Using this, we can revoke all the tokens issued to the user. Using this, revoke just the token that was used for the current request. Now our Laravel app is ready for API token authentication. Next, we will configure the Nuxt app. So in the Nuxt app, in the config.ts file, first thing we change this auth mode and set it to token. Let's head over to the documentation. Under the configuration section, let's scroll down. Here we have tokens configuration. Let's copy this and paste it right here in the Nuxt config file. Here this provider option specifies where the token will be stored. It supports either cookie or local storage. Since we are in local development and don't have HTTPS URL, so here I will set this provider to local storage, and this storage key defines the key used to store the tokens in the browser. Next, we need to update these Sanctum endpoints. Here the login path is going to be API tokens create, and this logout path is going to be API tokens delete. We are all set. Now it's time to test. Let's restart the app server. So now in the browser, in our app, let's open the inspect tool. In the applications, cookies, let's clear this. And now in the network tab, let's refresh the app. It should be logged out. Now let's try to log in. So enter email harish@example.com, password, and press the login, and it did not work. Here we get the error. If we see the response, the error is CSRF token mismatch. I forgot one thing in the Laravel app. So let's go to the editor and let's open the file bootstrap app.php. We have added this line earlier for SPA cookie authentication. Since we are now using token based authentication, we will need to remove this line. Now let's try to log in again. Let's close this network tab, enter the email harish@example.com, password, and click login button. Great. we are successfully logged in. That's it for the tutorial on Nuxt Sanctum Authentication module. If you found this module useful, please show your support for the project. Your support helps me to continue creating tutorials and open source project. You can check out one of these products. I have already created a detailed videos on them. You can find the links in the video description. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more coding content. Until next time, happy coding!